One of the goals of apocalyptic literature is to give you a radically different perspective on what's happening in the universe as finite human creatures, and especially as fallen finite human creatures, although we would still be limited even without our sin, but especially with our sin that makes us focused on our fleshly lusts. We so easily have our heads hanging down, just looking at the feet in front of us, metaphorically speaking, not understanding the grand truths. I mean, Romans 1, right? God's eternal glory and divine nature have been clearly revealed from the beginning, so that all are without excuse. But they suppress the truth in unrighteousness. So especially in our fallen state, man is just blind to the overwhelmingly manifest expressions of God's design and his work throughout all of the creation around us. We're just blind as a bat, blind as an idol that can never that can't speak or listen or see or hear. You become what you worship. So one of the goals of apocalyptic literature is to open your eyes. Apocalypse. It is an uncovering and unveiling, removing of the lid, and allowing you to see what's happening in the heavenly realms and what's happening on the earth from a heaven's eye view. So Revelation 4:1 is a classic apocalyptic style statement. After this, I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. John is going to get a view of what's happening in heaven. That's what happens in apocalyptic literatures. You get a much bigger eye into the spiritual realms of what's happening in the universe. And this is relevant to our structural outline, because I think there's a lot of back and forth. Remember how Hebrews went back and forth between teaching sections and then exhorting on the application for what to do about that teaching, back and forth. Revelation does a lot of back and forth between the heavenly realms and the earthly realms. So the 7 letters, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls are picturing very much what's happening on earth, although even there it's couched in spiritual language and intertextual biblical language that requires you to have a biblically saturated mind to understand it. But it's very much what's happening on earth amongst the churches and it's about famines and fire and plagues and wars that are happening on earth. The preludes, we'll look at them in a minute. The heavenly picture of Christ, the heavenly throne room. There's a brief prelude to the 7 trumpets. The Exodus picture, Song of Moses in chapter 15, preluding the 7 bowls, is a picture of the heavenly realm and God and his angels and the elders and the saints who had been slain for the word of the testimony around the heavenly council. And it's a picture of, it's the door opened in heaven to see what's happening in heaven. The interludes and postludes are a mixture of what's happening in the heavenly realms and the earthly realms, and in fact, the relationship between the two, because these are not two totally separate. The one is affecting the other. And so even when it's talking about the earthly realm, it's about the heavenly perspective on what's happening in the earthly realm. For example, the first half of chapter 7, where you have the 144,000, if you looked at these men on earth who have the seal of God on their foreheads, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't look all that impressive, just as Christ, in Isaiah 53, the coming suffering servant had nothing that we should admire him. Was not, people didn't look at him and say, "Oh, you're glowing with Messiah aura and glory," just by looking at him. Maybe when you saw his deeds and his acts, but just by looking at him, it was nothing special. I think if you looked at the 144,000, I think it's a martyr, Jesus's martyr army. But in any case, if you saw these who are sealed with the seal of God on their foreheads, they would look pretty plain, ordinary, unimpressive. But chapter 7 is giving you the heavenly view that this is God's spiritual army. So the interplay between the heavenly realm, the earthly realm, and how the two are affecting each other.